Hello, everybody. I am Melissa Forziat. I'm a keynote speaker and the host of this Halt and Catch Fire rewatch podcast. Now, when I speak, my topic is something that I call Take the Doughnut, which for me is another way to say Carpe Diem. It's about going after the things that you want in life. Something that I wanted to do this year was to rewatch the show Halt and Catch Fire, but this time talk about it with other people. A total novelty for me. And now we're up leveling that because I'm getting a chance to talk with people who worked on this show. And before I introduce my guest for today, who I'm very excited to introduce, I just wanted to give this quick housekeeping item. If you are brand new to the show Halt and Catch Fire and you're looking for spoiler-free content, go check out the episode recaps. Those are spoiler-free up until the episode you're on. If you want spoiler-filled content, stick with the interviews. So just so you know, there could be anything mentioned from any part of the show here today. But I hope you'll stick around because this is going to be a fun one. I am very excited to talk with Lisa Albert, who is a writer credited for 303, 308, and 407, and was also a producer on season 3 and consulting producer on consulting producer on seasons 3 and 4. So I'm just welcome. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
So let's talk a little bit about before we talk about anything else, how did you get to Halt and Catch Fire?
I got to Halt and Catch Fire because I was writing on Mad Men, and we were kind of going through the AMC sort of social events at the same time as Breaking Bad, and Melissa Bernstein was the executive producer of Breaking Bad. And so we kind of met each other socially at first. And then they started before we finished on Mad Men. But then when I finished up on Mad Men, I was like, Melissa came back to me and she said, you know, we have time, we have money for a part-timer, you know, and part-time has always been my schedule of choice. I'm not a fan of the 5-day work week. I think it's not good. And so I was like, sign me. I mean, I met with the Chris's, and you know, I was very candid about I think probably the least tech savvy of everybody on the show, both by virtue of age and by virtue of, you know, personality. And I said, you know, look, I don't know nothing about this world. And I still, as I told you, I've rewatched a bunch of things, and I still cannot follow from the life of me what is actually happening. You know, whatever. But so, you know, but the good news is the Chris's were smart enough, I think, to know that if you want this show to have a broad appeal, you need to be able to bring in people like me who don't know that world and try to make it accessible to us. And, you know, at the end of the day, I mean, as you know, I've watched a few of your recaps and a couple of your interview with Jeff Freilich, and who directed my first episode. And, you know, it's a show about relationships, and I can do that. So, you know, I was delighted to do it, and it remains pound for pound, I think, my happiest professional experience. It just worked on every level. And you know, it just was a lovely, I mean, I think all of us who worked on it, we've worked together in other iterations, not the whole group, but we do everything we can to continue working with each other because it's, you know, it's a very pleasant experience.
Oh, that's so amazing to hear. You know, it's interesting coming in for season 3 because yes, the show has been underway for some time now, but the show reinvents itself every season, and the writers reinvented itself in season 3. Yeah. So what kind of energy was there going into the writers' room when you first started?
You know, the energy was that the Chris's who created the show had not been running the show. They were paired up with somebody named Jonathan Lisco, who I have only heard tales of, but boy, I can't wait to meet him someday. And Allison Tatlock, who I know you will be interviewing eventually, met him on the strike at one point when we were striking last year. And she was like, I met Jonathan, he exists. And I was just like, oh my God. But he trained them good, and then let them, you know, sort of take over. And so the energy was, you know, first-time showrunners, creators of this show, create and people who, I mean, what was interesting to me, because obviously I watched the first two seasons before I, joined the writer's room, and I had to binge them pretty fast. And they just, the heat-seekingness of the way they kind of found that Cameron and Donna were such interesting characters, and allowed that to happen was such a great thing. And then we got left with, okay, now go. So that was, it was such a great sort of launching point. I have not had the time to go back and watch the beginning of season 3, so I can't even remember where we really started. But I know, I mean, we were in California, right? Is that where
We had just gotten to California.
Oh yeah, so we were, we were beginning, the beginning of Silicon Valley and all that that implies. And so, there just was such auspiciousness to the whole thing. So yeah. And we, as a group, we gelled immediately. I mean, it just, it was just like, everybody was playing a different instrument, but it all sounded good together, and it worked. So
you mentioned that you went back, you binged the first 2 seasons. Is there much else to do in terms of prep for this, or is it just getting into that writer's room at that point?
I'm sure I could have done all kinds of things, but I didn't. No, I mean, I didn't. I think there were probably articles that I read, and I did the best I could, but it really was just like the writer's room had actually already started up. I started like a few days into the writer's room, so I was just like, just get on it, and so there weren't no time for, couldn't be reading biographies of people and stuff.
Yeah. Tell me big picture what that process looked like in the writers. I mean, for those of us who don't know much about how a writer's room would work, and especially on this show, I imagine you're starting out with sort of like the bigger picture of the story first and then getting to finer details. But can you sort of sum up what that process is?
I mean, it's different obviously on every show. On this show, it seemed to be, and like I say, I wasn't there I don't think I was there for the first few days of either season, actually. But my sense of what happened on those days that I missed is that the Chris's would go away and sort of hunker down with each other before the season started, and kind of, have a sense of sort of where they wanted the season to go in broad strokes. And then, then the writer's room was just the sort of the fun process of, moving all the pieces around and trying to get to that place. We did not know, and I don't think they ever knew from one season to the next whether they were getting picked up. So like season 3, we did not know whether or not we were gonna, have a season 4, which is annoying. And so then when season 4 picked up, we at that point did know that would be our final season. So that was a rare case in television of being able to really, decide how you wanted to land your plane. And I think, as I said, I did watch. I was lucky enough burdened with, guilty of killing Gordon, planned by the whole writer's room, mind you. I know my face to that.
To be that close to that detail, like we watch it for 40 some odd minutes, and but then you had to sit with that.
I mean, we all did, and yeah. And it was very well sort of we discussed it at length, and we much of the kind of gorgeousness of the way it happened, that flashback, that was Zach Whedon's idea. So I mean, it was all a writer's room mush of plotting. It was, and then it was mine to screw up in the writing. But and I think, as I recall, I mean, there was some discussion of not killing Gordon, and but it was that weird thing of, I think his illness was established in season 2, I think.
His illness was diagnosed in season 2. We saw moments in season 1 where you go, what was that? We saw like a hallucination moment that was explained away. So I wonder, like, it feels like people knew that they wanted to set up for something as early as season 1, but it was diagnosed officially in season 2.
Yeah. I mean, and so I just think as sort of the second writer's room, I think we felt somewhat obligated to pay it off in some way. I think there was some discussion of like, maybe we'll kill someone else off and that'll be the big, but it's just like, I think eventually it got to that point of like, when you give a character a life-threatening illness, chances are what happens in real life is people die of them. That's why they're so scary.
Especially when you fast forwarded enough in time, or, I guess gone forward enough in time where, he was diagnosed the better part of a decade ago. Once you get to the end of the show.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's, so it felt like the sort of honest thing to do. And in, truly, when you think about it, Gordon was the character that was connected to everybody in a truly, I mean, not that it wouldn't have been horrible to see anybody else die, but he is the one that kind of had big gut punch impact on pretty much all of our main characters. So, he was, he kind of had a target on his back, both for that reason and for the disease, the illness reason. But yeah, it was. So we did know on season 4 kind of where we were going, and that's a gift too. I mean, as sad as it was to end the show, to be able to know, because I watched the end of season 3 also, just to sort of try to get my bearings before talking to you, and God, that would have been so upsetting. I mean, because season 3 did end with the sort of the World Wide Web, which, could have been, it could have been argued as a decent ending for the series. Like it takes you to the beginning of the thing that we now all know. But God, it would have been so sad if we hadn't gotten all of our people back to some kind of better place, and except for Gordon.
I know. Well, but I do think there were things about the ending of season 3 that could have worked as a series finale, but not when you have something like the way Donna is now ostracized from the group at the end. Just like that feels like a thing that would have needed some sort of resolution. So I think there were pieces of it that worked, but if it had ended there,
it would have broken my heart. Donna was always my sort of, I loved writing that character. She was always the one that if I had a choice, I was like, can I write the Donna story? I love that actress. It's interesting rewatching now 7 or 8 years later. I'm like, man, I relate to Boz a lot now. But I think that's an age thing. But I really related to Donna, and I felt so bad for how it ended in season 3, and watching her sort of arc to get to that beautiful place. And I mean, those last, I did watch, through to the end of the series, and those last few episodes are just so beautiful, and yeah,
just gorgeous. Let's go back a little bit here to the first episode that you did, which was 303, Flipping the Switch. This is a specific question, but really it's meant more broadly. So we get a scene where Ryan goes to Joe's apartment for a party. Those characters are just getting to know each other, really. That setting though is so detailed and rich in terms of it being a party. There are a lot of background actors in there, so we're seeing all the different things. Some are wearing costumes, some are doing illicit substances, some are hooking up with each other. We've got interesting lighting choices happening everywhere, and Ryan's just kind of scanning through it. So I was curious when I was watching this scene, because we go from there to this very intimate, private moment on the balcony, feet away from the party, between Ryan and Joe. So there is this significant contrast when you're writing something like this. How much of this is going into the script? How much of this is conversation with, I don't know, production design, or whoever's going to be working with the background actors?
I mean, I think a lot. I mean, I'd love to say it was all scripted. I don't think it probably was. I mean, certainly, are we still in the 1980s at that point? I think we might still be.
We are.
80s San Francisco. I mean, you gotta have illicit sex, you gotta have drugs, you gotta have all that stuff. And so and I don't even know what illicit sex means anymore, actually. So when you have, I mean, and I do, I'm pretty sure there were people serving that were just had painted clothing on. They were naked, but their clothing was painted on them.
Oh, is that what was happening there? No, I have to go back and rewatch.
That's
Yes.
what's happening there. And I think that was a way of solving for, we wanted people to be somewhat naked, and it was like, okay, well, we'll paint them like they have, pinstripe suits on. And so I can't remember whether that was scripted or that was a solve that happened after the script. But I mean, for big scenes like that, you can only script so much. And then once you get to a location and see what you've got, you got to just sort of roll with it. And I think, it ended up looking great. And, that David Bowie song was perfect, and, all that. And then the sort of counterpoint of Joe being out on the balcony, that was very much intentional. And obviously just that idea of him, being so famous and so known and so alone. And, and I think even I think he even has the line that these are not his friends. Half of them don't even know who he is, So, I mean, it's just like, I think, we really wanted to show that place for him. And it was such a good way of showing it. And then, as you said in your recap, I mean, that balcony becomes a very important place later on in the season. I don't know if we knew that at that point, but it does. So
yeah. Well, in this episode, we're going to see Diane and Boz emerging as a new character pairing. And Annabeth Gish and Toby Huss, they're going to have great chemistry together, which I guess you could probably count on with those particular actors.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you always can in a show. So with something like this, even when you're pairing these two actors together, how much of this is, we're going to write some scenes and sort of test this out and see how this pairing works when we get on set, or how much of it is, this is it, this is what's happening, and we're going within the writer's room no matter what?
I mean, look, I think if they had no chemistry, we probably would not have had them get married in season 4. They get married in season 4, right? So, I mean, but, you roll the dice. You have chemistry reads with when you're casting to make sure that there is some chemistry. And then, you hire really good actors who can, even if they're not feeling it, can act like they're feeling it. And I don't know whether those two people, I don't know. They're both really good actors. So who knows? Either they felt it and it was easy, or they had to act. But either way, you're safe. And, I mean, Boz is such a fun sort of talker. And Annabeth's character, Diane, was such a kind of, I mean, they were, it was such a good team. I mean, they were such a good idea of a partnership. So, I mean, I think we loaded it for success. So,
yeah. One of the scenes in this episode that is, every time we get Cam and Joe together after season 1, between 2 and 3, seasons 2 and 3, you don't really get a lot of screen time with Cam and Joe together. So when we do get those scenes, we just sink our teeth into them. So, with this one, we're going to see Cam encountering Joe outside of San Francisco City College. He was supposed to take a coding class, and then she was brought in as a guest lecturer. So he was like, I'm going to hang outside and not have this encounter right now. But then he did confront her when she left the building. So just to walk everybody through kind of a couple of the main points of this scene. So this is the first time that they've seen each other since she used that Trojan horse, sort of, he was the Trojan horse to bring a virus to Westnet at the end of season 2. She's seeing him for the first time. She says, "You're going to tell me I'm a horrible person? Go ahead." She thinks he's lying, or maybe lying to himself about being a student there. She doesn't buy his Zen persona. He seems a little bit rattled after the encounter, but it does fire him to then go back to Ryan and say, let's work on something new.
mm-hmm.
So when you think about that scene, I'm sure there's a lot you're trying to accomplish in just a little bit of time here. What were some of the main points you were trying to hit?
I mean, I think you answered the question in the question, which is, I think we were trying to remind Joe what it felt like to have a partnership that was meaningful to him and to do things that were meaningful to him. And so we wanted to activate, his relationship with Ryan. And that's, I think, what kind of ultimately happens is that he gets a little of his old fire back. And I mean, Cameron is one of the people who sees him clearly. And I mean, I think he was actually a student in that class. I think he was taking that class. It's just that when he heard her voice, he wasn't aware that she was going to be the guest lecturer. And then he, he demurs and doesn't go in. So he wasn't lying. I mean, I think he was trying to code, and I think he always did feel a little, less than all the people who could do that. And so, he wanted to be able to do that for real. And I think he even says, I might not be good at it, but I want to know how to do it. And so, um, but, but, and again, I haven't had a chance to watch the first few episodes of the season, but, he's like doing the black turtleneck thing, right? I mean, he's doing the whole, whatever that persona is thing. And Cameron can see right through that. And I think Joe wants to be seen for, he wants to be seen, period, full stop, actually. And she sees him. And so, and then he gets back, he gets a little mojo back, and he goes back to Ryan, and he's like, okay, we're ditching this office, and we're going to start working. So.
Yeah, the pushback she has with him in that scene, because season 2, we saw him trying to be things, but really failing. Like, he was trying to change, but he really did not have the tools, and he was constantly backsliding. And you're, as a viewer, you're like, is he changing really? Come on, this doesn't seem right. Season 3, it feels different. It feels like there is something that's kind of taken a little bit more in terms of him trying to make these changes. So when she comes in and says, I don't believe a bit of this, as a viewer, you almost want to defend him a little bit. I mean, like, at that point, you're writing a scene like this. How much do you think he's changed?
Good question. I mean, I think he wanted to change, which is not the same as changing. But and I think any scene, I mean, that character of Joe McMillan is such a hard character to write and to play. He's a visionary, I mean, both Cameron and Joe were, for me anyway, difficult and exciting to write, but like they are people with fairy dust on them in a way that the Clarks, are just normal people, and I don't have fairy dust on me, so I don't know what that's like, but I do know that when they're human, it's so satisfying. And seeing Joe try and be so human and so vulnerable, it's just so heartwarming to see. And so, but so to answer your question, I feel like it's, I think he really wanted to change, and I think he does ultimately change, in the course of the series. And he, I mean, he's still a super complicated guy, and he has an ego, and all those things are still true about him, but he wants to connect, and he finds connections, and then they fail, and all those things are still true for him. And I mean, and sometimes that camera is on his face, and with Cameron too, and you're just like, oh my God, I mean, the amount of internal stuff going on in those two faces is just, I mean, all of them, they're just, the acting is so freaking good. It's just, it was really fun to watch with some distance. It was just like, damn, those people are so good at their jobs. So anyway, but I do think he wanted to change. So
yeah, I love the way that you put that, because I think this idea that that they have fairy dust on them, and I think for so many of us, we might aspire to having that kind of skill and having that kind of, to being geniuses like that. There might be something aspirational about that. But when you just said, like, but it's satisfying for us to see them be human, it's just like this really interesting way to look at it. We're going to get a much darker episode, 308, You Are Not Safe. First of all, you co-wrote that with Allison Tatlock. So what is that process of partnering with somebody else to write a script?
I mean, it can be good, it could be not good. But and I think it's just because you did give me some questions in advance, and many of the questions are going to be answered by Allison, because she wrote the much more difficult part of that script, which was the Ryan Joe stuff. And so she wrote Ryan's manifesto, which was like, my God, that was so good. But I remember when we divvied it up, I was actually on set, covering set for my first episode. So I was in Atlanta writing that. And which also meant that, I was writing it on the weekend, and, it was not ideal in certain ways, but great. But we just divvied it up by storyline. And then I remember we swapped drafts just to make sure that the transitions were sort of working. Well, I think I told you I spoke to her on the phone the other day because I was like, which scenes did you write? Which scenes did I write? And because there was like one scene, and this was just after I'd heard your recap, and I was like, did I write the trick-or-treating stuff? And she was like, no, I definitely wrote that. And I was like, okay, that was great. I loved that scene. But I have no recollection of writing so much of it. But I wrote all the Donna, that's where they have the failed IPO, right? I remember when we divvied it up, there were two hot potatoes. One was Ryan's manifesto and one was Cameron's game. And it was like someone was going to have to write one of them and someone was going to have to write the other. Allison kindly volunteered to do the Ryan thing because that was some seriously heavy lifting, and she killed it. And I had to write Cameron's game, which is deeply ironic if you know me, because I have never played a video game in my life. Never have played one. I have now created a fake one and worked on one in progress, but never actually been at the controls. I don't even know what they're like. So
that feels like a two truths and a lie kind of answer.
I just, but so yeah, so I got to write that, and that was super fun because I got to sort of cannibalize a comic book I had started like 10 years earlier, and I was like, oh, I can use all those 5 senses things I thought of. I like that. So, so I got to write that, and that was fun. And but so we really just divvied it up by storyline. Couldn't have been simpler.
Well, that game, yeah, with the 5 senses bit, I put out there on the podcast, I was like, are these things that aspirationally she is trying to acquire? And so like she's to me, it looks like she's doing therapy through her game. So what in your mind, you're writing this, what are you trying to get her to work through? Because this is still pretty acute pain that she's dealing with. And she doesn't have much of a bouncing board. I'm not sure Tom wants to hear a lot of this story over and over again, maybe a little.
Of which story?
Everything that just went down with the IPO. So no. Like she's probably processing it in her head a lot. What for you was coming out in that game?
Well, I mean, for me, because I did also watch the episode right before I watched 3 or 4, whatever it was, the threshold, the one where they have the vote. And, you see Cam at the end of that episode, and she is gutted. I mean, just so gutted. So we're talking about a person who is literally trying to put herself back together piece by piece by piece. And I think that for me, it's just like, she wants to have all of those abilities for herself. She wants to have, I know when I'm losing my shit, and that's a fairly regular, occurrence, a sense of proportion, like how big is this problem? Where do I fit into it all? A sense of, I can't remember, a sense of humor. Please God, don't ever take that away from me. I'll die. I mean, so I think all those things were for her, were just like trying to put herself back together. And then when Mark O'Brien, what's her boyfriend's name again? Tom. When Tom comes back, and he just sees light in her eyes again, of like that she's got her creative spirit back. It's so beautiful. I don't think he gives a shit what she's talking about. It's just like he sees her come back to life again, and it's so. It's just, and I mean, in her ability to sort of just radiate from those blue eyes, it's just like, oy, oy, oy. So,
the Mackenzie Davis face, it's like,
I mean, it's amazing.
What did you write? What do you want me to do? Okay. And then she just looks at the camera. My goodness.
So beautiful. And just, I mean, and to see some some sort of childlike wonder, which she can do like nobody, is so beautiful. So,
well, and also there is no ending. You just get to keep playing. So why was that important?
I just think, philosophically, that's a nice thing to say, I don't have a good answer for that other than, I mean, look, I loved the ending of Pilgrim. That was beautiful. Mm-hmm. But, I also like the ending of, just you get another at bat. that's
Yeah.
your reward.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So just as we try to place which scenes you worked on here, did you work on the Donna, Boz, Diane hotel room scene?
Yeah.
I thought that was a really interesting one because one of the things that we're left with after 307 is why did Boz just vote that way? And you can make some guesses, but we get into that hotel room, and yeah, he voted with Donna, but he is a little resentful of it, and Diane's a little like very. She's trying to maybe not even mediate. She's just trying not to let this fire get too big, pretty much, and it's just a really complicated scene because you're still trying to place how did all of this land. So for you, working on a scene like this, where are you trying to place us with the characters at this point when they still have a job to do, but there's so much fallout?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's for a scene like that. Also, you're just like, I don't, my memory isn't that good on all of it, but it's like, there's tons of exposition that you're getting out, of like what's going on, what's an IPO, what are these out of town things, blah, blah. I mean, such boring, dry stuff to me anyway. And so, any ability that you can find as a writer to sort of wrap it up into something emotional, which is, there is still some funky tension between Boz and Diane, and I mean between Boz and Donna, and for Donna also, she's got to deal with the fact that these two, does she know they're together yet?
Yeah.
She does.
Yeah.
So I mean, she knows that, here's a couple and I'm on the outs, and, I mean, it's, so just navigating all of that, it makes a scene that's ultimately a pretty, expositional scene have some, meat on the bones, and it's just better. So.
Yeah. So with the, let's see, there's some crossover here in terms of some scenes that I'm not sure if you or Allison sort of worked on these. So the Joe goes to Cam's house scene, that sounds like that would have been Allison.
Yeah.
And then Cam finds Ryan.
That's Allison too.
That's Allison as well.
All of that, all of the Ryan stuff was Allison.
So we have one that doesn't have really any of those folks. We've got Gordon and Joe. Gordon telling Joe that he's sick.
I don't think I wrote that.
Okay. Awesome. Well, yeah, I mean, so for you, it was very much dropping in for this really big game scene. And then the Donna pieces with the IPO.
And then Donna, I mean, there's Donna, isn't this the one where she like stays in a fancy hotel and there's
does
kind of stuff? Yeah.
And there's the aftermath of, well, she has I don't know if this is meant to be she's on the news. She's telling the story of,
right.
She's trying to do the PR stuff that you do around the IPO.
Right, with the annoying woman who wants to talk about shoes.
Yeah. And then we get her and Diane sort of absorbing that the IPO opens much lower than it was meant to. And there's this most amazing breakdown that Donna has in that room where it goes horribly and she just has this reaction. So, in the beginning of this episode, when Donna is with Diane and Boz in that hotel room, she's still very, like, it's still sore to the touch. If, when the Cam comes up in that room in a question, she's like really quick to lash out. Mm-hmm. But then we see her completely deflate, and you can see the guilt after the IPO opens so badly. So for you all, like, that's a very quick turn to have to make with her. How do you look at making something like that natural and organic?
The turn from what to what?
From I'm just like feeling defensive of what she did, and maybe like Cam was the problem, to this IPO opens, we see a number on the screen and she just melts. How do you earn that as a writer?
Well, I mean, for me, it's like the burden on Donna of being right. I mean, she sacrificed a friendship. She had to be right. So when she wasn't right, I mean, that is an instantaneous sort of, oh my God, I wasn't right. I mean, I just think I think there is no, I mean, I think that is a fast moment of just like, oh, wow. Oh, whoa, whoa, whoa. I mean, it's so, yeah. I mean, there actually I would argue there are very few moments in life where you have such an instantaneous realization that you're like, oh, there's confirmation that I wasn't right. And then I think you see Cam and Tom talking about it, and it's just like he just shakes his head, and it's just like it's not good, and then it ends with that scene in the supermarket, right? Where you just see Donna. Oh God, I mean, just it's funny rewatching this. So many of my favorite moments are moments that have no dialogue because the actors are so good, and I'm just like, as a writer, you're like, I mean, words are great and everything, but when you can get narrative out of people without words, it's even more amazing. And just that scene of them looking at each other and seeing Cameron, just there's no engagement there, and Donna just moving along in the aisle with whatever she had in her grocery cart. It's just it's horrifying.
Yeah. What a journey those two have really throughout this show. When let's look at 407 here, which is another very hard episode. So we've got Who Needs a Guy? One thing that's interesting for me in Cam's story is that we bring in Alexa, who is really challenging Cam to think, just, I don't know, she's pushing Cam. Like, her ideas are not good enough for Alexa at any point, really. Why is this character important for Cam's story?
It's funny. I think that something like that Alexa character, I think there was such mythology going on in sort of Silicon Valley at that time where it was just, I don't even know if Alexa knew what a good idea or a bad idea was. No disrespect to the character, but I'm just like, I think there just was this sense of like that there were these touched people that if you just kept pushing them, they would generate amazing ideas. And it was just like, so at a certain, there's part of it that I think is nonsense. It's just like, no, Cam was actually making a game. It seemed clear that Alexa was, not as interested in it as she wanted her to be. And that, at that point, Pilgrim had already been really badly reviewed, right? So
Mhm.
Cam was kind of smarting and wanted a win and wasn't getting it. And so, obviously then felt obligated to go have dinner with this person that she probably wouldn't have wanted to go have dinner with. But if she'd had a win earlier that day, I think she would have felt comfortable saying, I'm taking my boyfriend out for dinner. But she didn't. So she had to kind of do the political thing of go out and have dinner with someone that she probably didn't want to have dinner with, and some other person that she probably also didn't want to have dinner with. And so, I just think it was that sort of the game of succeeding in Silicon Valley was kind of what was happening there. And just the sort of silliness of, that she was getting high on the walk with her, like Cam wasn't getting high. Like, I mean, it just was, there just was this, I mean, it's so much of rewatching. It was so fun to sort of see that 90s kind of just love letter to kind of achievement, and particularly for like Donna's character, and that always in a pencil skirt, and like very LA Law kind of aesthetic to the whole, and just was like, what a just what a silly vision of success and everything, but it was so what was happening. And but so I was just, it felt very much like Alexa was playing a part, and Cameron was just sort of had to play along. But I think the actual ideas were almost irrelevant, but I mean, that's probably my own defensiveness because I don't understand half of them. I'm like, I don't know what these are, but all I know is Cam felt bad that she hadn't succeeded better, and that she felt, because part of, it's funny, watching that episode, so much of it was just trying to build it right, because it takes place in 24 hours, that episode, and just trying to build it right so that there would be time for Joe to be left on his own, go to Donna's, because that scene with Donna and Joe to me is kind of in certain ways the most important scene, just because we would have had no other opportunity to bring them together until after Gordon's death, and it wouldn't have been the same. You know, they wouldn't have, we needed to establish a little bit of trust between them in order to buy ourselves the beautiful episode that comes after this, which is really one of my absolute favorites, where it wouldn't have been as poignant to see them together had they not been able to find a little bit of common ground. And so much was just like literally kind of the scheduling of like how to make it work so that that scene could happen in a way that was real, and that the timing of Gordon's death would all work. I mean, it was really like, it was just you know, trying to figure out the appointment book of it all.
What an interesting constraint to have, of like really trying to match this up with a 24-hour day.
I mean, you know, I mean, it's helpful in certain ways because, you know, I mean, having too much freedom, which I also, you know, gets back to the Alexa thing. It's like giving creative people too much freedom. You know, we need swaddling. You know, we need people to, you know, help us stay, you know, to keep from flailing. And I think Cameron was flailing, and, you know, and that's a scary place to be creatively. So, you know, so anyway, it's but yeah, no, it's helpful in certain ways to have constraints to sort of try to make things work. So
yeah, well, one thing we do see, and I'm going to say this is maybe my favorite detail of the entire show, is the payoff of the idea that Cam has created a game that only Donna can win. Like, of all the humans on Earth, Donna's the only one who will pursue it and finish this game. And like,
I mean, I think she'd like to think that more than, but people that have to be like Donna, you know. But
yeah, but for us, like in this show, we've seen people try to play it and lose interest, and now we're seeing somebody finish it and fall in love with it, and that is Donna. And you know, you once again, there you are writing an ending of a game.
I mean, you know, again, the ending was, I mean, that was a room decision of how that game was going to end. I mean, I think I had to sort of figure out what I wanted to see in terms of, I do remember sort of there's like a bridge that kind of blows up. And you know what I realized watching, which I felt was so beautiful that I had not ever put together before, but that moment of when Pilgrim sort of jumps into the void, which is so beautiful. It's so resonant with the next episode where Gordon jumps. And I was like, oh my God. And then they both come to Hearth and Mother, and like, I hadn't seen that sort of resonance, and it was really touching. I mean, as I say, I think the next episode is kind of one of my favorites in certain ways, just because it has no tech in it at all. It's just about human beings and feelings and loss. And it was so, you know, Jack Whedon wrote it, and he wrote the shit out of it, and Cantwell directed it, and he directed the shit out of it. And it's just, excuse my cursing, I hope it's okay.
This is exactly how I want curses to be used. They're so good at what they do.
But anyway, you know, it's but I had not ever seen those two sort of leaps and what they meant. And so, you know, beautiful. But yeah, and again, that was a wordless scene where it's watching her face and watching her face register that, you know, you can't beat that. There was a scene in 303 too, where she comes home to Gordon, and he's sitting after they have that terrible fight at Mutiny, and and again, a wordless scene where I'm like, oh God, look at those faces. They've just told me everything I need to know. So anyway, but yes, that's a beautiful. And then it comes back later on when in Zach's episode where Cameron tells her that, you know, I mean, where Donna tells her that she finishes the game. I mean, it's just, you know, it's beautiful.
The right before Gordon dies, there's that he writes on the board redesign. Joe comes in and says, no, you got to relaunch. It's relaunch. And so they have a little discussion about that. And then Gordon changes his word to relaunch. And it's such a powerful thing for that to be the last word that he writes, the last message that he gives to Joe, that they create together. Where did this idea come from, and what was the resonance behind these words?
You know, I mean, the room, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, there are a few ideas that I do remember where they came from. I don't remember where that idea came from. I do remember you know, I do remember liking the idea that, that relaunch subsumes redesign, and that they had a little dialogue about that. But, you know, I mean, what more poignant thing to have on a board after someone has died? I think you almost can sort of reverse engineer at that point of just being like, okay, this is where we are. What's the saddest thing we can write? Birthday Gordon was, would have been silly. But yeah, no.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. And then, you write this beautiful way for him to pass on that doesn't really ever, we never see the moment, and we don't need to. It's very artistic. It's shown artistically, but also it must have been written artistically for it to come across that way. So, you know, uh, tell me about just like the choices that went into showing the before and the after and the around it.
I mean, again, that was a room, decision, to sort of do that flashback as a way of showing his death. It really just was, mine to screw up. I mean, it's not that hard, that writing, once you have that idea. The idea was the thing, appropriately enough, for Halt and Catch Fire. So yeah, I mean, it's all pretty basic, but I like I said, I mean, what needed to be sort of calibrated and what was hard and fun to try to put together was sort of just the minute by minuteness of it. Like, that there had to be a reason for Joe to stay with Donna. There had to be a reason for Joe not to drive away immediately so that he'd be there, and like, so all those things. And again, getting his hand caught in the door was something we decided in the room, but it just was like to sort of really sit with those moments and make sure that it felt real, I mean, that no one was doing anything that was unmotivated, because, that'll take you out of the story. And it's just like everything seemed right. And, and everybody's, and the way, poor Joe gets left alone that night, and he goes to see someone he would never go to see under normal circumstances, but his girlfriend just ditched him, his partner just ditched him. He's got a little niggly thought because he doesn't quite trust where this intel has come from, so he goes to see Donna, of all people. And yet, and then, when she unloads on him, which she fricking, is so, I found satisfying, when she's like, you won, you got it all, to sort of see him have to like accept that. And then that great moment where he's like, just seeing him understand and really empathize with what it's like to be thought ill of, and when he says been there, it's like, yeah, he knows what it's like to be thought ill of, and it's horrible. And particularly to be thought ill of by people that you love and respect. I mean, it's so interesting, because I just feel like so much of the show is kind of like this three-legged table between the four main characters, and someone's on the outs, and it's never quite right. And then magically, sort of by the end, they're all in place again, except Gordon's gone. But so there'll always be that imbalance there. But to sort of to make sure that his death came at a moment when it would have, again, maximum impact on everybody. It just, I mean, it was a very satisfying thing to
even the choice that the first time you hear anybody, well, I guess it's not totally acknowledging it, but to see that the first character reactions that come after his death are Katie happening to pick up the phone when Donna's leaving a voicemail. It's like, those are characters that we wouldn't have thought to pair together too. And now there's a reason for this like really interesting.
And how
like,
great is that scene in the next episode where Katie comes? I mean, it's just like, I mean, these people are, the characters are so inhabited and so real. And it's just, Anna Klumsky just killed it in that next episode where, I mean, she killed it in the whole thing, but that next episode where it's like the current girlfriend and the ex-wife, and I mean, the whole thing, it's and then the niceness of things between, is niceness a word? But anyway, how nice things are between Gordon and Donna, when he picks her up in the previous episode from getting busted for drunk driving, and then in the scene in this episode where they're talking about the haircut, and he asks about her meetings, and you realize he's one of the few people who knows that she's going to meetings. And it's just like there's just such forgiveness all going through all of it. And it just, yeah, I mean, I listened to your recap of, this is the one I listened to your recap of, and you talked a lot about the love, and how you felt the love. And it was just like, there was so much love there. Everybody, and thwarted love and expressed love and all the kinds of love. And it was just so, yeah, it was really, really nice, really good.
Oh,
Um,
well, are there any last like favorite memories for you from working on this show that you wanted to share?
I mean, look, the whole thing was great. I mean, truly, we have, if I could work with them for the rest of my career, I'd be fine with it. That writer's room was amazing. Those actors were amazing. It's funny, it was a show that I don't think got the love it deserved when it was on the air. And there's something deeply, and I think one of the reasons that we kind of loved it as much as we did is we weren't getting the affirmation, so we had to kind of give it to each other. And so in a weird way, I think it was almost good for the show, because we had to, we just all had to acknowledge that we were there because we loved it, and that was all we got. And then this kind of lovely thing that's happening now of like these recaps, and the fact that it, a couple of years ago the New York Times did a thing of, shows you missed, and that it's finally getting some love now is so satisfying, and so well deserved. And so I think that might be my happiest thing now, is that people are finding it and resonating with it and appreciating it, because it's good.
That's the amazing thing about your industry. Like if somebody pulled up a spreadsheet from a project that I did 10 years ago, it would not be written about in an article, but now people can potentially rediscover or discover for the first time work that you did a long time ago. And I think that's just such a beautiful thing about what you do. I know it's been a strange time for your industry. Is there anything that you've been up to recently-ish, or that you can talk about as something that maybe just came out since Halt and Catch Fire that you want to direct our attention to?
After Halt, I did a show called Paper Girls, also with the Chris's.
It was good.
And we got canceled after one season, and it killed me. That's one of the ones that, I mean, for shows that didn't go, I think that's my most like, why did they not give us a second season on that show? It was so full of potential.
Especially when you see Stranger Things doing so well now. Like there was something about that show that kind of hit something that there's an appetite for.
I mean, I think they expect, I mean, because it came out after Stranger Things, and I think I don't know what their expectations were, but whatever they were, we weren't able to fulfill them, and we did not get the seasons that we deserved. But it was a shame. And then I did a couple shows again with with the Chris's that didn't go, and then I did a show with Mark Lafferty and Zach Whedon that also didn't go. So there's a lot of that, and hopefully there'll be less of that now that we're kind of in some kind of new world order. I have no idea what it's going to look like, and I am waiting for the next gig. That is, I wrote a spec pilot. I'm like Charlie Brown with a football every time. I'm like, okay, what do you think, guys? Want to do this? So we'll see if anything happens with that. But if past is prologue, it will die on the vine, and I'll be very upset. But hopefully something great will come along, and I'll do that.
Well, we'll all hope for the same thing. We'll take a look at your IMDb and follow that, and hopefully see something great pop up on it soon.
IMDb, like all things online about me, are so incorrect. And if my Wikipedia entrance says that I was born in 1924, so
gasp.
I look
doing these things.
Good. I look very good for 100-year-old person. And I have no idea or inclination to correct it, because I think it's funny. But so all those things are, the information is not that good on them. But
oh my goodness. Well, I think the person who runs the Halt and Catch Fire Wikipedia listens to these, so maybe we can get some truth in there somehow for you.
1959.
Oh my goodness.
Any more than we're at age. Anyway, but thank you so much for this. It's really, it's so cool, and it's so meta that like the thing you do is the thing that the show is about. And I mean, I love the sort of the whole kind of you know, I don't know, you know, snake eating its own tail of it all. I just think it's, you
Yeah.
know, Ouroboros, is that what it's called?
Is that what it is?
I think
Wow.
I think that's what it's called. But anyway, it's cool that, you know, that this technology that we wrote about is the technology that allows this new idea of recaps and what it all means. And I'm so fascinated by, I mean, so next time I want to interview you about what it's like to,
Oh, that's
I just,
exciting.
no, I'm just like, I don't, it's a fascinating community that you've built. And, you know, and the whole thing is so interesting. Do you know the people who comment? Do you?
I do now. That's the thing. It got us to the thing. You know, like it like you're saying, it's just like the recaps and the interviews got me to the people who want to talk about this. And 10 years ago, if somebody comments on, you know, a comment that was put out there today, that person will get notified and they'll have a fresh conversation like it's just happening for the first time. So there's something very like constant about this format that I'm just is so appropriate, I think, to the show. I'm glad that you're noticing that.
No, I
Yeah.
mean, I'm like, you know, there were just, you know, I've always thought there were, you know, there were two surefire things that were going to come out of the web: pornography and community. And like community is it's so interesting to watch it. Yeah, anyway, it's very cool. So thank you for what you're doing. It's really very.
Oh, thank you for that. Thank you for doing this. Stick around for a second after we said goodbye to everybody. But to all of you who are watching, go out there and watch Halt and Catch Fire. Bye, everybody.
Bye.